Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today let's chat about some of my recent reads that are a little more recent than my last video. So I have about 6 books to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let's get into it. Start off with Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is book 1 in the Founders trilogy. It was actually one of my 2023 goals to finally read this book. So I'm so happy to say that I completed one of my goals for the year. I really enjoyed this book. I will definitely be reading the rest of the trilogy. When I first mentioned that I was going to read this book, a couple of you mentioned in the comments to go into the magic system and think of it as magical coding. I thought that was perfect. That was such a great thing to have in the back of my mind while I was reading this book. So kind of the setup for this world is that we have these merchant houses. If you are a member of the merchant house, or if you are affiliated with a merchant house, you are very well taken care of. You live in a more comfortable part of the city. And if you're not, you're from this area called the Commons, and people are just struggling to survive. It's really grimy and just kind of a free-for-all, very lawless. And this is where we meet our main character, Sanchia, and she is actually tasked with stealing something that was intended for someone in one of the merchant houses. So she steals this item at the beginning of the book, ends up actually opening up the item, and from there it is just a complete mess. One of my favorite parts in the story, like I mentioned, is the magic system. It's called Scribd, and it is one of the most unique magic systems I think I've read to date. But what it is you're essentially taking some kind of inanimate object and you can change that object's complete reality in order for it to do something else other than its intended purpose. It is so fascinating, and that's actually only the foundation of this magic system. Robert Jackson Bennett, I think, does such a great job of expanding on this, and it really starts to become more science-like as the book goes on. And even there are some moments in the book where you start getting into more of the philosophical elements of this magic system. What is the nature of an object and how are you really going to change it to do this? I think it's so interesting the way that that all unfolds as the book goes on. And I love our main character, Sanchia. Like I mentioned, she's a skilled thief. She does have a companion in this book, and in the beginning the companion was cracking some jokes, and I was like, oh my god, is this about to be a funny story? I don't think I'm ready for this. But the tone of the story did start to smooth out a little bit, and I really enjoyed the two of them together. I will say though, one of my least favorite parts of this book are the other characters. Foundryside has been a story described as having a found family trope, and I just really didn't care about any of the other characters except for one. There is a character, a part of this group, whose motivations I think are just really strong, and they have this great sense of justice and just wanting to do right. I really felt for this character and their backstory that they had, so I really loved them. But the other people in the group wasn't the biggest fan of, and there are 2 characters who Sanchia knew beforehand who end up in the group. I realized for technical reasons why they had to be involved, but just overall as characters, I just really could not care less about. Overall, for me, I do think the characters were the weakest part of this book, but Sanchia and the way that she interacts with them, I thought was great. Sanchia's dialogue is just so sharp. She's witty, she thinks on her feet. It's really good. So I did really love this book overall, and I am gonna be getting into Shorefall sometime soon. Next, I read Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This was so good. I love this book. This is a middle grade fantasy, and Amari will just pull you in immediately. She is such a great character. This book was everything I was anticipating it would be: adventurous, magical, fun, and just so much more. I really love this, and it's so refreshing in the sense that, sometimes in fantasy stories, you have the main character who is a little bit timid and you're just waiting for them to get into their character arc and be stronger and stand up for themselves and just accept this magical world and their abilities and things like that. And Amari, you just did not get that with her. She came in and she was already defending herself, defending her friends. And as far as her getting sucked into this magical world, she definitely had her, oh my god, is this real kind of moment. But after that, she was in it and she was just ready to go and to earn her spot in this bureau. So I love that aspect of the story. I thought the side characters in this were also great and memorable. But in this, we have our main character, Amari, and her older brother, Quentin, has been missing, and the police think one thing: oh, he just ran away, he's no good. And at school, Amari is being bullied and people are saying her brother is dead, but she does not believe any of that. She knows her brother is still out there somewhere, and she is determined still to find out what happened to him. But one day though, she gets this nomination to join what's known as the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. And she gets there and finds out that all of these supernatural creatures are real and that the Bureau has all of these different divisions. And then you find out that in order for Amari to actually stay at the Bureau, she has to fight for her spot in one of the divisions. And the story just rolls from there as we start learning more about Amari and what she can do and just the supernatural world in general. It's a lot going on in this book, but Amari, I think, is just such a great lead character. I really love this. I will definitely be reading book 2, and yeah, I thought this was a great story. Next, I finished Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Unpopular opinion incoming. I did not like this book. When I finished it, you know, I thought it was fine, but now that it has sat with me for a bit longer, this is actually a book that I finished a while ago. Now that it's sat with me for some time, this book was not for me at all. And you could take my opinion with a grain of salt and be like, oh, Tori, you don't read romance. That's fine. Do what you want with this. Honestly, after a while, I don't even know a better way to say this. I just found this book to be so boring. I was just not interested in what was going on. I think this book tends to focus a lot of time, maybe too much time, on the relationship that the main character Nora has with her sister Libby. In my opinion, Libby is just not interesting enough to try to be balancing their storyline with the relationship that Nora is developing with the male love interest Charlie. For me, it just felt like those two storylines just kept crashing into each other. I think it would have been a little bit better if Libby had been, or if I had found Libby to be a little more interesting than she was. She just felt like she was kind of there. And it's unfortunate because Nora and Libby, they've been through a lot together. They've experienced just hardships growing up. They've had a traumatic loss in their life. And so you know that all of that is there, but just kind of reading about it and just seeing the way that they interact, I just think some elements of their dynamic were just kind of distracting me from what I was wanting to happen with her and Charlie. That's kind of my biggest issue with the book. And also after a certain point, I just wasn't really invested in the setting anymore. Nora and Libby, they put together this list of things that they want to do when they are on vacation together, and it just, you know, after a while it just feels like you're just hitting these beats, like you're checking things off the list, but none of it was just really grabbing me. Again, unpopular opinion, I know so many people love this book. I will say though, I did like the spin on the typical like corporate woman wanting everything, going to the small town, falling in love, that sort of thing. I love, there's some little twisty things that happen in there that Emily Henry does to kind of subvert those usual tropes, which I really did appreciate. So I did like that, and I really did enjoy the ending. So those are the positive sides of it, but just overall as a reading experience, it wasn't for me. I have been told that maybe I should give Beach Read a try, but honestly, I probably won't. I was just curious to see what all the hype was about surrounding Book Lovers, but I didn't really want to go down like an Emily Henry rabbit hole. So I think I'm just gonna leave it there for now. Yeah, those are my 2 cents on Book Lovers. Then I read Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. This is book 1, and I think it's called the Mortal Techniques series, but each book in the series it stands on its own. It just takes place in the same world. And I gotta say, this was unexpectedly good. This is an Asian inspired, really short Asian inspired story. I think this book does such a great job of balancing characters and action and just like a Japanese mythology and different legends. This has been sitting on my Kindle for years at this point, and I finally was just like, I need to just sit down and read this, and it was actually a really pleasant surprise. The 2 things that I really love about this are the characters and the action. This is such a short book. It's like 300 pages, maybe not even a full 300 pages, and it, pun intended, it really packs a punch. It starts off with action, and from there it just becomes this really exciting and almost cinematic like journey as this kid is trying to round up these different warriors and heroes to complete this task that he has to do. It's really good. If this has been on your radar, I would actually recommend going to check this book out. So we have this young boy, he's kind of creepy honestly, but this young boy, Ian, he has been given this mission by the god of death to take down this emperor, but he cannot do this alone. So he starts going around and bringing these heroes back, and just along the way, all of these unlikely characters start coming together. They all have their signature weapons and ways of fighting and these legendary names, and just the way that these characters come together, the way that they play off of each other, and again, all of the intense action moments that these characters find themselves in. This is actually really good. So I think if you are for something that heavily features like martial arts and samurai, I think you would really enjoy this. It also really reminds me of the game Ghost of Tsushima. So if you've played that, or even if you haven't played it, but if you're familiar with it, I think you would also really enjoy this book. So yeah, that's Never Die. Really enjoyed this, and I actually will be checking out some more books in this world. Next, I read The Blood Gift by Annie Davenport. This is another one that just unfortunately did not work for me, and that was just such a huge disappointment. I actually mentioned this very briefly in my, I think it was my mid-year check-in. So this is another one that I finished a while ago. This fell really, really flat for me. One of the frustrations I've heard a lot with this book from like people on Book Talk, because I spent a lot of time on TikTok, is that this series should have been a trilogy. And I actually disagree with that. I think if there was a third book, this book, The Blood Gift, would have just suffered really severely from second book syndrome. This book was almost 500 pages, if not 500 pages. And I just feel like there was so much missed opportunity to, you know, actually get us to where we should have been going. So much missed opportunity in terms of making this as concise as possible. There were little subplots in this, one of them being the romantic subplot that I think really distracted from where the story could have been going and the time that we could have spent doing other things. I feel like the writing in this book took the biggest and most noticeable hit. I think I said this in my mid-year check-in. I am not the prose police. I don't care. As long as the prose flows well and it's not like distracting me, it's not pulling me out, I'm not like, oh, that was cringy. As long as nothing like that is happening, I am the last person who's gonna be like, that wasn't flowery enough. I don't care. But in this, there was just so much awkward and cringy dialogue. Some of the prose was just really odd in some places, and I'm just thinking, what is going on right now? Given where the blood trials ended, that was such a solid foundation for where this story, for where this second book could have gone. I did like the expansion on Akena's abilities. We did get some great moments of world building, some things that were expanded on in the first book, which I really appreciated. So I did love those aspects, but overall, I just feel like there were so many little things that just kept adding up to overall detract from where we could have been heading in this story. For people to finish the book and not say, this should have been 3 books, like what happened? So overall, this just fell very flat for me, which is unfortunate because I actually really enjoyed the blood trials. I thought that was such a strong first book. I loved how brutal the trials were in that book. I loved all of the relationships that started developing between all the characters in that book. I thought the world building was solid in that story, and I couldn't wait to see how it would develop more in this book. And I just feel like the second book just got bogged down by so many things that felt a little unnecessary to the story. So, and last but certainly not least, let's talk about the showstopper of 2023 so far. That is none other than Lightbringer by Pierce Brown, which is book 6 in the Red Rising saga. This was phenomenal, and I genuinely don't even know what else to say. Let's just all pack it up and go home. Going into this book, I was so curious to see how the tone of this book would feel, the pace of this book would feel coming out of something like Dark Age. I sound like a broken record at this point, but Dark Age is dark. Dark Age is brutal, and the book is so intense and so dark that by the end of it, you just feel like, to a certain extent, you just feel like there's no hope. Like, where could these characters possibly go? What are we gonna do? So I feel like Lightbringer, just even from a writing standpoint, was a tall order. I feel like I remember maybe a couple of years ago, I think this is true, like where would I get this from? But I feel like I remember Pierce Brown mentioning that he had to scrap like half of Lightbringer because it just was not working out. And now, having read the book, I can see why this book would have been so hard to write, because like, where do you go after Dark Age? You've gotten to a point now in the series where everything has reached this massive climactic moment. Both sides have lashed out and had their say. Both sides are beaten down and injured and all this kind of stuff. And so many things on both sides have gone wrong. A lot of things have gone right. Many people have been lost. And then you come into something like Lightbringer, and it's like, well, now we have to regroup. Now we have to re-strategize. Now we need more allies. Now this war has escalated to Mars. I think the entire arc of this series so far has just been nothing short of incredible. From where we started in Red Rising, I promise you, you could never have imagined where we just ended up at the end of Lightbringer. I think Lightbringer does such an excellent job of not only resetting the tone, regrouping these characters, trying to find new ways that we can possibly win this war. It's reached a point now where we're starting to slow down and get those more like intimate character moments and conversations, and characters are reminiscing about the old days from the original trilogy, which makes you as the reader kind of fall back into that, and you're like reflecting on this journey and you're like, yeah, I remember that. It's so incredible. They were so young back then. This book just feels like a gift to Red Rising fans, like of how far we've come. And these characters in this book, there are so many big character moments in this book, and it's a character moment in particular at the end that is just one of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite speeches that I have read in the last couple of years. I just love this. I loved everything about Lightbringer. And I could see some people being like, oh, this is just, you know, so much slower than something like Dark Age or even the rest of the original trilogy. And yeah, it is, because we've reached a point now in the series where we have fought so much, and we're still fighting in this book. Don't get me wrong, there's some big action moments in this book. One character, I'm not gonna spoil who they are, but they get some great chapters in this book of just being this amazing political and tactical mind during this war on Mars. Oh, it's so good. I forgot what my original thought was because I'm still rambling, but this was so good. This is by far my favorite of 2023. I knew I would love it, but oh my God, I have just reached a new point of appreciation and love for this series. I cannot wait to see what's gonna happen in Red God. I'm just so in love and in awe with the character moments that we get in this book. I thought they were just so beautifully done. I loved it. This was great. That's it. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what you've been reading recently, if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you've read Lightbringer. No spoilers, but I do want to talk to you about it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.